Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. I'm so glad you stopped by today because today is not what I had planned at all for this week. This week I actually wanted to post right before Halloween and get another Halloween themed project out. I had fabric ordered and everything. I was waiting for it, and the seller never shipped it. Finally had to ask for a refund and order it from another person. So I'm not going back to that seller, obviously, and I'm gonna just stick with the person I really like, because the only reason I decided to go with them was I was gonna save $3 and I learned my lesson. So today's project is going to be a little bit different. Today we are going to be making a pair of antlers. I thought it'd be really fun with the change of seasons to try and make a deer or stag type creature, and I haven't gone in full depth on how to make antlers, so I thought I'd do a video on that, and then next week I can use the antlers and make a stag or some type of creature with it. So let's get started. Okay guys, the first thing we need to do before we start on our antlers is we need to design a layout for them. That way it's going to be a lot simpler when we start on actually making them. It always helps to have an idea of what you're doing, especially when you have something that needs such an intricate wire frame. So the first thing that we need to do is we need to decide how long we want our antlers. So I'm just going to kind of mark that out on the paper just to give me an idea so my sketch stays within that length. So that longest point is basically going to be the very center of our antlers, and we're going to base everything off of that. So I'm just going to mark out how I want that to be shaped, and then I'm going to decide where I want other points to branch off on the antlers. In total, I think I want to have about 5 points on each antler. Now, I already have a rough idea of how I want my antlers to look when I'm finished with them, but if you're not really sure how all the points should go on your antlers, you could Google image just antlers in general and just find a pair that you really like the style of and just use that as a guide. After we have our basic layout all drawn out, it's time to measure all of our different points so we can get our wires cut. So basically how you want to measure out your wires is you're going to follow the lines that you drew for each point. So you're going to start with one point and measure all the way down to the base of the antlers right at the very bottom. You're going to do this for all of the points. After I'm done getting my measurements, I'm going to write them down next to the point that I need them for. That way I don't forget or mix anything up. Then I'm going to get my wire out and I'm going to start cutting my pieces of wire to fit these measurements. Now remember, we're making 2 antlers, so a pair of antlers, so each measurement you need to make 2 wires for. Okay, I have all my wires and now I need to start bending them into place. So I'm still going to use our pattern and I'm going to start bending the wires to fit the shape that we have drawn out. So I'm going to do this to all of my wires and make sure that they're nice and even. To get both of your antlers as even as possible, it helps to bend both of the wires for each point at the same time. Now this could hurt your hands if you have really weak hands, so just be careful, and if it's not going to work for you, just do one wire at a time. Okay, I have everything bent into place, and now we need to start putting our wires together. So I'm going to take a thinner wire. If you guys are curious, the original thick wire that I'm using is a 14 gauge galvanized steel. The smaller gauge of wire I'm using is a 20 gauge. So to put everything together, you're going to start with your longest wire first. This is going to be the middle of the antler. You're going to take your 20 gauge and you're going to wrap it around that antler right about where we're going to connect another piece of wire. So look at your chart, and right where there's another point forming, you're going to kind of wrap right there. After you have your 20 gauge nice and secure on your first piece of wire, you're then going to grab your second wire, put them together, and start wrapping. Basically, how we're going to put the wires together is you're going to follow the antlers from the very top going down. So as you go down the antlers and you get to a point, you're going to add that wire to the wire frame. So we're just going to be basically wrapping our thinner wire around our wires and adding them as we get further and further down the base of the antler. One little thing, if you didn't measure out enough of the small wire to wrap around it, all you need to do is find the closest point to where you stopped your other wire, and you're just going to wrap it around that and then just keep going down the antler. So it's okay if you don't start out with a longer piece of wire like I did. It's probably safer to start out with a shorter one so you don't scratch yourself with it. Because if you notice, it's kind of flailing around everywhere as I'm wrapping around it, and you just want to be careful. Once you have everything put together and it's nice and secure, we can now start on the clay. So the first thing that we need to do is we need to add clay to the points of the antler first. We're going to basically take a strip of clay, we're going to measure it out to fit onto that part of the wire, and then we're going to wrap it around and blend and smooth it together. You want to have it to where as you go further down the antler they get a little thicker and the points get as thin as you can. Don't get super thin because you don't want the tips to be fragile. So we're going to do this to all of the points of the antlers, and then once we have those all nicely done, we're going to bake these for about 20 minutes at 275 Fahrenheit. This is very similar to how I like to do my claws for my creature's feet. Basically, any sharp point that you have a bunch of clay on and you're worried about bumping, I usually like to bake first before I continue with my clay. So we're going to get those baked, and then once they're all nice and cool, we can start working on the clay again. So what we're going to do to finish covering up our wire is we're going to take larger strips of clay this time and we're going to lay it over the wire and we're going to start blending the clay into the points. So we're going to use our fingers and we're just going to keep smoothing it out until it's nice and even. Try and get as much of the edge smoothed away as possible. Now to help get these realistic, the further down you go, you want to get your antler thicker and thicker. So you don't want the very end of the antler to be super thick, you're just going to kind of gradually add more clay to the wire as you go further down the antler. Now if you wanted to do a different style, right now I'm doing just a basic deer antler, but if you wanted to do something like an elk or a moose, what you're going to do as you're adding clay to this is you're going to kind of create a webbing between each point. So you're going to kind of have a gradual curve instead of cleaning up the edges where the antlers just all of a sudden form. So after I have all of my wire completely covered, everything is nice and smoothed out, the last little bit of sculpting that I need to do is to add some texture to this. So I'm going to use some of my long tools to create some scratches and some line work. I really don't want anything super defined, I just want a little bit of roughness to it. Now it's okay if the points don't have any texture if you didn't do that, because I didn't add any texture to my points either, mainly because sometimes with deer antlers they're actually smoother as they get to the tips because they end up using them for fighting and different things like that, so they end up getting kind of polished. But the base of the antler, like the very middle part of it, is going to be kind of rough and bumpy. And then once I'm done adding all the texture to them and I'm really happy with how they look, I'm going to put them in the oven again. 275 Fahrenheit is the temperature, and we're going to put them in for about 45 to 55 minutes. And then once your antlers are done baking, they've cooled to touch and everything, you can start using them to sculpt the face of your creature. So we're basically done with our antlers right now. Next week we're going to use these to make another creature, and I'm also going to show you guys how to paint, and I'm even glittering these because of the style of the creature, so keep an eye out for that. I really wanted to have this video just focusing on how to make the antlers themselves because there's a lot of detail in how to make the skeleton for it and everything like that, and it needed a bit more time than just a small clip in another video. Okay guys, and that's how I made a pair of antlers. I had so much fun and I can't wait to use them for my next project. Make sure to keep an eye out for that video, it'll be next week. Anyways guys, thank you so much for watching. Make sure to like, subscribe, do all that fun stuff, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye!